excuse me.
Oh, sorry, I'm sorry.
Yeah, and I
forgot that I wanted to let my ranking member say some words. Hi, Kathy. You can go on ahead, Kathy.
Well, that was interesting. I got kicked out of the meeting.
and excuse me, Chairman Sanchez.
I am. Okay.
I lost the connection as well, but I do apologize to everyone. I just wanted to make an opening remark, if I may, and welcome everyone to the meeting. I know the leadership team and we were fortunate enough
and ranking members of the public.
Okay, that we were fortunate enough to visit in person over the summer. So I think the committee members are going to be in for a real treat today with a very comprehensive and informative presentation. I'd like to recognize Dr. TECCA and his team for taking the time to come down and educate our committee members, the Commission and the Department of Education on the presentation that we received. I'm so apologetic, but I do have another meeting that I'm actually chairing, so I'm only going to stay for a few minutes today. So I wish you all well. Thank you, and I think it's an exciting venture, and I know the committee members are going to have lots of questions. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I'm sorry I won't be able to be here for the whole presentation, but I'll circle back with you, and I wish everyone well today. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy, and no problem. And Dr. TECCA, I apologize. I think I mentioned a different doctor earlier.
That's fine.
Let's see, does Doug, do you have anything to say before the presentation?
No, we're just excited. I think this is going to be an eye-opener for a lot of us. I look forward to hearing the presentation and hearing what SD is planning on doing also. And I'm joining now. Thank you.
Okay, great. Okay, Dr. TECCA, you can start.
All right, so let me get the presentation screen going. Can everyone see the opening screen? Yes. All right, so good morning. Thank you for your invitation to today's meeting. We are, when I say we, the group that's here from the Education Cooperative Connections Academy, that are known as TECCA. Our hope is by the end of this presentation, we'll have a lens into the virtual public educational world and a better understanding of how TECCA provides K-12 Massachusetts students a quality virtual public schooling experience. So with that, actually, I'm hearing. I don't know if it can be. So we'll begin with introductions. My name is Patrick TECCA. I'm the superintendent of TECCA. A little background about me. I've been in education for 23 years. Basically in the traditional brick and mortar world, I was a school teacher, administrator, principal, and assistant principal. I came to TECCA about 6 years ago, where I was the assistant principal and principal, and I've been the superintendent of TECCA for approximately 2 years now. So I'm just going to turn it over and let everyone introduce themselves. So Kathleen.
Good morning. I'm Kathleen Ellis. I worked at TECCA for almost 2 years, and I'm currently the business manager. Prior to that, I was the business manager at one of the educational cooperatives or collaboratives in Massachusetts for about 6 years. I've worked in finance for nonprofits and the private industry throughout my career.
Terry? I am Terry Green. I'm the Director of Special Education at TECCA. This is my 40th year in education and my 6th year here at TECCA. And I've been a Director of Special Education for approximately 17 years now.
My name is Sarah Dalton. I'm the Director of School Counseling Services here at TECCA. I was actually with TECCA when we opened, so this is my 8th year at TECCA.
My name is Heidi Nelson-Bufa. I'm the Director of Assessment, Instruction, and Professional Development here at TECCA. This is my 16th year in education and my 9th year as a virtual educator, with 5 of those at TECCA.
Hi, my name is Melanie Jubanian. I'm the elementary school principal here at TECCA. This is also my 8th year here. I started out as a 4th grade teacher for several years and then moved into this role at administration.
Thank you. So this is the presentation team. Our agenda for today, let me flip the slide, is we're going to go over the major components of TECCA and how we do school in a virtual context. We're going to start with student demographics in terms of why would this student choose to attend TECCA. We'll get into the finances a little bit with Kathleen. Look at school counseling services. How do you counsel students in a virtual context? Look at special education. TECCA has a pretty high percentage of students on IEPs in addition to 504s and EL. So Terry's going to talk a little bit about that. Assessment, instruction, and professional development. As I said, we're just like a regular traditional brick and mortar public school. So we do have assessments, statewide assessments that we're responsible for participating in. Professional development, we offer it at TECCA. So Heidi's going to talk about that. Melanie is going to get into kind of a view into our virtual school door. So you're going to be able to walk in and see what it looks like to be a teacher or a student of TECCA. One of the things I'd like to say about TECCA too is that our curriculum, our instruction, everything is completely transparent to the parent as well. They can see live time, the curriculum, they can see everything their student is learning. They can see the real-time progress of the student in terms of academics, the contacts. We have a thing called an escalation system, where they are with participation, performance, and things like that. I'm going to speak a little bit about TECCA's successes, and then we're going to end this session, as it was introduced earlier, with a question and answer session. So that's the agenda for the day. So I thought it would be important to calibrate a foundation of understanding, because what are we talking about when we talk about virtual and online education? Some of us have taken courses in college in the 90s, and we had drop boxes where you go online and you do some assignments and you throw it into this magical place and you get a grade spit out. Distance learning. I was part of Bridgewater State College at the time. Now it's Bridgewater State University, where you're in a class and there was a big TV set and a camera on top. And we were interacting with students from Cape Cod. So from a distance, that's why it was called distance learning. Then something happened. So in March of 2020, traditional models in everybody, well, TECCA really didn't have to make much of a shift, but traditional models had to shift. Regardless of the resources the district or the town had, regardless of any training, which in my opinion completely distorted the perspective of what virtual education is, because now we have terms such as hybrid, remote, online. And us, when I say us, I'm talking about TECCA's district leadership team, myself and the people you see here. We work very closely with the state of Massachusetts. When I say the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, I refer to them as DESE. So whenever I say DESE, I'm referring to the state. We work very closely with the state and other superintendents across the Commonwealth to work with them on pivoting to this remote, hybrid, virtual model. And what we found is a huge discrepancy in terms of how towns did it. You would have towns that would have one-to-one initiatives, which means one device per one student, and they utilized, some of them, a completely synchronous experience. Like this, we're in a Zoom room. So the students would go through virtual classes one after another throughout the day and have a kind of hybrid virtual experience, such as what I'm talking about right here, as well as some districts went completely asynchronous, meaning they sent out a packet of homework on a Monday, asked for it to come back on a Friday, and that was their quote, remote virtual learning experience. That's not what we're talking about. So all of our participants right here, all of you, have some lens that you're looking at this world through because of your personal experience. Some of you may have had children, some of you may have had colleagues that had to pivot. What we're talking about is a model that has been in existence for 15 years. So we're part of a Connections Academy family, and they've been in existence for over 15 years. Our school has been in existence going on our eighth year. And our school operates with both synchronous and asynchronous learning activities. What that means is that we have live lesson experiences where students come into a virtual classroom with all the quote bells and whistles that you would have in a traditional model, but we do it virtually, where they interact with their other students and their peers and their educators. We have targeted instruction where they interact with special education teachers or just get extra help. We have a rigorous curriculum that is aligned to the Massachusetts curriculum frameworks with supplemental materials. TECCA has clubs and activities. We're a virtual school, but we have clubs and activities and social events and in-person celebrations. We have prom. Well, we did have prom. We had to put it off last year, but we have prom. We have graduation ceremonies. We have welcome back events. Like I was saying, we have clubs and activities that occur after school. So we are a virtual public school that is regulated by the state. We follow all rules and regulations as any traditional brick and mortar school does follow, but we just do it virtually. So I'm kind of just creating a foundation so everyone's kind of on the same perspective of what we are talking about when we talk about TECCA and virtual schooling. So I'm not going to just read every aspect of this slide, but we came into existence over the 2014-15 school year. We are sponsored. So in order to create a public school in Massachusetts, you have to be sponsored by a quote town or a district. So the district that sponsors us, the first three letters of our names, is the Education Cooperative. So the Education Cooperative is made up of about, I think it's now 18 because a couple towns just joined, 18 cities and towns that create this cooperative. They sponsored the development of TECCA. And the Commonwealth Virtual Schools, CMVS, approved our application, and that's how we came into existence. We are one of 2 virtual schools in Massachusetts. I do not look at it as a competition. What I look at this as an option for students. Not one model fits the need of every single student. I think that's something, well, we knew before the pandemic, but I think that's something we're learning as we've gone through the pandemic and where we are today. As an example, the other virtual school, the elementary school, is almost exclusively synchronous. So if you want a completely synchronous experience, that's where you go. If you want a mixture of synchronous and asynchronous experience with flexibility, well, TECCA is the place you go. If you don't want any of that and you want to be in person, go into a door at 8 o'clock in the morning, go through a series of class, lunch, couple more classes, and then leave or go to an activity after school, traditional brick and mortar world is the one for you. So my point is, we talk about differentiation. We differentiate instruction to meet the needs of all learners. We talk about the multiple intelligence, the body kinesthetic, the visual, the auditory learners. We never really thought about differentiating the models in which we deliver education. So we're differentiating that model. So TECCA is one of those options. As I said, we opened in 2014-15 with about 200 students, 14 faculty and staff. At this point, as of yesterday or so, we had 2,725 students approximately. We have about 500 students on the wait list. We work very closely with DESE and Commissioner Riley, and we actually increased our enrollment recently by 300. So our enrollment cap right now is 3,000. And we moved the enrollment preference of students that have medical needs to number 1. So we're slowly opening the door to make sure we can cater the needs to the most vulnerable students in Massachusetts. When we look at TECCA, access and equity really is not an issue. So when we talk about demographics, such as socioeconomic status, the town or city you live in with certain resources as compared to those who don't, race, ethnicity, identification, all of those types of demographics, we have all of it at TECCA. If you need a computer because you can't afford it, we provide it. If you need access to the internet because you can't afford it or you're in a rural area, we provide it. We have students in hospital settings I'm going to get to in a moment. We provide hotspots. We've got a satellite dish for somebody in the middle of the woods that couldn't have internet access. I'm laughing, Terry, remember that one. So there really is no access equity issues here. Every single student, regardless of where you reside in Massachusetts, are getting the same quality, fantastic instruction from our wonderful faculty and staff, have the same access to our supplemental materials, supplemental activities, the curriculum, as well as our clubs and activities. So everyone, regardless of demographic, has the same or similar experience. So who attends TECCA? That is the big question. Why would somebody choose to come to TECCA? As I said earlier, TECCA is not a fit for everybody, but I'm arguing that either is a brick and mortar world school. So this is the demographic of students who attend TECCA. You can read the list, but I'm just going to highlight a few. So we have high academic achievers. We have truly gifted students. We also have students that we can cater the experience to their individual need. As an example, we might have a 7th grader that really struggles in ELA. So we can put them in a supportive 7th grade ELA class. Let's say they are on grade level for social studies and science. So they're in the general social studies and science 7th grade class. And let's say they are excelling at math and they wanted to, and they can, and they have the ability to take, let's just throw out calculus. We can put them in that class. So we can differentiate the complete instruction for that learner. We have homeschooled students where if you're a parent of a homeschool student, you understand that as the curriculum gets more difficult, it's harder to teach. For example, AP psychology, if you're not an AP psychology expert. And here's the thing about our environment. Parents usually act as learning coaches, so they can still interact with their child and their learning as they would in the homeschool environment. We have athletes, we have students in Olympic development programs, we have aspiring professional hockey players. We have students that were on Broadway, that were in traveling Broadway shows. We have actors and actresses. We have a special education population. We can meet the needs of special education students that sometimes a brick and mortar world district can't, where they might have to add a district place for $80,000 to $100,000. We can service some of those students. We have a high level of student population that's high with social, emotional, and anxiety concerns, from moderate to severe. Sometimes you won't see those students in the traditional brick and mortar world school setting because they'd be labeled as, quote, truant, because they have such school phobia or anxiety or social emotional concerns. We have students that have medical challenges. As I said earlier, we have some students that are currently in hospital settings. They want the normality of the public school experience, so they stay with us. Students who are relentlessly bullied, parents, students that are pregnant, students that want a flexible schedule. But here's the thing too, TECCA attracts a population of students that look at our school as a last chance option, where, I'm not saying this disrespectfully to the traditional brick and mortar schools, where those school settings had failed them or it just didn't fit well. So we have a group of students that come in already off cohort into our high school, meaning there's a cohort clock that begins in 9th grade and you have 4 years to graduate. If you go off of that, you're considered an off cohort student. We attract a variety of off cohort students to our TECCA environment. So I thought I would give you a couple quotes of students, 5 quotes of some students that are currently on our wait list to give you just a glimpse into their world and what they're thinking and why they want to attend TECCA. I'm not going to read them verbatim, but the student has an autoimmune disorder. Dad is diagnosed with cancer. They're looking at this school as a safe place for the family. The student was held back because of anxiety, severe anxiety, bullied in 7th grade, never recovered from the bullying. The student's going to drop out, but they're willing to complete their education if they have a virtual setting. Daughter was in TECCA last year. I didn't really get into this, but we supported Massachusetts school districts across the Commonwealth and temporarily allowed students to enroll into TECCA as full-time students to experience the virtual educational world, how we provide it. And in this case, the student did attend TECCA last year from another district, liked it, did really well, and decided they wanted to continue. Student has severe anxiety and depression. Sister with the same situation, but the sister did very well at TECCA, so they wanted their sibling to do well too. And finally, the student is in pre-ballet, professional ballet program with a flexible schedule. They had friends with children that graduated from TECCA and went off to college, and it comes as highly recommended to them, which is why they want to come to TECCA. So what I thought was I would show you a distribution based on density of our counties. If you look at that map, and there you, Connecticut right on there. Maybe someday you'll have some distribution as well. But anyways, the darker the color, the more densely populated the TECCA student group is. What we're finding right now is in the southeastern part of Massachusetts, which encompasses Fall River, New Bedford, and Taunton. That area, I can't really point, but it's on the bottom right, I guess, if you would look at it like that. That is starting to really expand. That's one of our greatest growth areas. So that's a little bit about the TECCA, our inception, who attends TECCA and why. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Kathleen, who is going to talk about the school funding.
Good morning. So TECCA is funded through DESE, which is our state, the education. We receive a tuition amount per student in our program, which gives us a total of about $24 million from the state. So our current tuition rate that we get for students is $8,788 per student. DESE or the state does take $75 of that for the administration of the program. And this tuition is divided and paid to us on a monthly basis. So we continuously have a stream of funds coming in. The current annual increase for our tuition is about 1%. So our tuition is supporting our special education, our regular education funding. It's primarily the entire funding source for TECCA. TECCA also does participate in some federal grants. We receive money from Title I, Title II, Title IV, and the 240 IDEA or special education grant. That's about $1.8 million that we received there. And then currently we are participating in the federal funds from the CARES Act and the American Rescue Plan. These funds are distributed to us based on our 2019 Title I allocations. So in Massachusetts, these are known as the ESSER funds, which is Elementary Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund. We currently are getting 4.1 million of that, but again, those are a sort of a one-time set of funds. So that's the funding of how TECCA gets its funding to proceed. So then I wanted to show you how we spend those funds. And the majority of our funds are spent on salaries and benefits for our teachers or our full-time employees. We have about 181 currently full-time employees, which is about $15 million a year. Our learning management system is the next largest piece of money that we have spent for our school. That's about $10 million. Beyond that, the rest of the money is spent on school-specific expenses where we run 3 different schools. We run an elementary, a middle school, and a high school, and each of them have their own specific expenses they use to run their programs. There is an authorizer oversight. Patrick mentioned in the beginning that we are sponsored by the Education Cooperative. So there is a 4% fee that they collect of our school choice revenue. So that is the almost $1 million that we're paying to our sponsor. And then the rest of the money is spent on things like insurance, professional services, facilities, which is about 1.5 million. We do not have a school. We have an office building that we use for some of the office staff. So our facilities costs are quite low. And that's the spending.
Can move to the next slide, Patrick. Thank you. So how do you do school counseling online? Well, it's actually quite similar to doing school counseling in person. It's just a little bit different. So we have great staffing at TECCA for our school counseling department. We have 2 elementary school counselors, 3 middle school counselors, and 6 high school counselors. They all provide one-to-one school counseling, small group school counseling, things like lunch bunch at the younger grades. They manage any sort of child welfare concerns that we might have, as well as students who might need a little more support and oversight based on perhaps things that are going on at home or mental health diagnoses. Our counselors provide monthly push-in live lessons in the general ed classroom, talking about different social emotional learning topics, as well as post-secondary planning in the high school grades. They're working with students on executive functioning skills, doing a lot of support for our parents and caretakers at TECCA, given that, the learning coach at TECCA is so vital to a student's success. And when I say learning coach, I mean the adult that's home with them, which is typically a parent or caretaker. They're very involved in their students' education. And as a result, school counselors are working a lot with parents to support them through the process. They're also working with in and out of school stakeholders, so things like outside therapists and clinicians, probation officers, mentors, anyone working with the student who's on their team. Post-secondary planning, as I mentioned before, for high school students and late middle school rather, and social skills development. We also have new this year a credit recovery school counselor. So as Dr. Latuca mentioned previously, because we are an alternative to the traditional brick and mortar environment, we do attract some students who have not been successful and who need credit recovery in order to graduate. We have realized over the years that this is a population that needs significant support. So this year we have piloted a new school counselor whose sole job is to work with students who are in those credit recovery courses. And they're providing really specific targeted support to make sure that the students are earning the credits they're trying to recover. We also have an off-cohort success coach, and I'll talk about success coaches in a minute, but they collaborate very much together to just try and work students toward graduation. We also have social workers at TECCA. When we first opened, we did not have any social workers, and the school counselors were trying to do some home visits as necessary. There's many things that can be done online, but some things just require an in-person conversation. So we are lucky to have 4 school counselors or social workers rather, who work remotely full-time from different regions of the state. So they are connecting families with resources. So perhaps they need food support, help with insurance, or getting their student a therapist, daycare vouchers, things of that nature. They're doing home visits. They're meeting them in person at their home, or perhaps a public location like a library or Dunkin' Donuts, to try and help the family with school engagement. They're working with our McKinney-Vento families, making sure they have the resources that they need to stay enrolled in school and be successful. They're also working with the courts and filing 51A reports, which is working with DCF in Massachusetts, as well as CRAs, which is child requiring assistance. So that's through the court system when truancy is a concern. And then the last part of our school counseling services department is something called the success coach. So every student at TECCA, regardless of their grade, has a homeroom teacher. And it's different from brick and mortar homeroom. What a homeroom teacher does at TECCA is they're having a check-in phone call with the student once every other week. That's a mandatory phone call. You know, we don't see our students in person. So being able to talk with them synchronously on the phone is vital for us to make sure that they're doing okay, but also building that relationship with them, giving them an adult in the school that they know really cares about them, cares about their success. And it's also helpful to have just that one point person, a first point of contact, and a link to the school. So parents are also working with their students' homeroom teacher. The coaches specifically have homerooms of about 100 students max. So they're making about 50 check-in calls per week, but they're checking in with students beyond that regular check-in as well. If a student needs more check-ins, they can do that. They have the flexibility because their entire job is just being a homeroom teacher for those students. They're not grading anything. They don't have any lesson planning to do. They're really just making sure that students have what they need. And when you don't see students in person, this is a really vital part of our program, just to make sure that students are successful. Some of the different programs we use in the counseling department at TECCA, we use Second Step, which is a social emotional learning platform, as well as GoZen. We use GoZen and Second Step with K-8 grades. GoZen is really fun in terms of learning mindfulness and anti-anxiety coping skills. And then we use something called Virtual Job Shadow, which students in grades 6 through 12 have access to, and it is a post-secondary platform, so students can virtually shadow hundreds of jobs to find out what they might like to do after high school, as well as what type of education that they might need. And I'm going to pass it over to Terry Green to talk about special ed.
Terry, you might be muted. I can't really see you.
Sorry, I thought I had just unmuted myself. So, good morning, everyone. So special education at TECCA is in some ways similar to brick and mortar settings that I've worked in before, and in other ways, very, very unique. We have approximately 22% of the students at TECCA have an IEP, which is higher than the state average. And that's because TECCA is a program that attracts a certain kind of student, those students with anxiety and things that were preventing them from being successful in a brick and mortar school. The most common disabilities that we see, students with emotional disabilities make up about 20% of our special ed population. Students with specific learning disabilities, another 20% of our population. And at this time, students on the autism spectrum are about 19% of our special ed population. We have students in other categories as well. So students with developmental delay, students with intellectual disabilities. We do have a substantially separate program that we run called the COMPASS program. We have students with communication disabilities, ADHD, physical disabilities, neurological disabilities, and we do have deaf and blind students here at TECCA. We'll talk a little bit about how we work with that and what kind of services we provide for that. So the programmatic responsibility for TECCA, once a student enrolls with us, we become the LEA, or the legal education agency for the student. So they withdraw from their home district in order to enroll with TECCA, because we are a public school, so they have to unenroll from their previous school. Once the student does enroll with us, we have about 30 days to amend the IEP that came from the previous district. And what we're typically amending are accommodations that students come to us with that they will not need in a virtual setting. For example, preferential seating, things like that are not needed in our environment. So we are typically amending the IEP that the student comes to us with within the first 30 days. We are programmatically responsible for everything once they enroll with us in terms of state and federal regulations. We have to provide the special education services. We hold annual review IEP meetings as well as eligibility meetings, so reevaluations or initial evaluations for students. We conduct all of the evaluations ourselves. We do have currently 3 school psychologists that are located in different parts of the state, and they do meet in person with students to do the testing. So we've not gone remote with testing, we're doing that in person. So we conduct all of those evaluations. Our staff is responsible for writing all of the IEPs for students. And of course, all other state and federal guidelines in terms of timelines from when a parent signs a consent to evaluate, the number of days we have to complete the evaluation, the number of days we have to hold the meeting, and the number of days to get that IEP out to the family after that meeting. So we offer a lot of services and technology at TECCA. We do provide in-class support and co-teaching models for students, which is similar to what I had experienced previously in brick and mortar. We offer small group learning supports. So those are taught by our special education teachers, small groups. They're either previewing or reviewing material or working on goals and benchmarks from a student's IEP. We do have transition programming for students 14 and up. We offer a course that is called Academic Support, and it focuses on several things. One being executive functioning skills, another being study skills, and then the third being preparation for post-secondary. And we do use the virtual job shadow that Sarah Dalton just mentioned with our students, and they they really find that very helpful and very exciting to explore all of the careers that they are able to there. We do have, as I said, a substantially separate program for students with intellectual disabilities. And in that program, we do have the opportunity to have a student, excuse me, have a student begin where their skill set is rather than a grade level curriculum. We adjust the curriculum to the students' functioning levels. Again, full evaluation services. We do offer virtual speech and language. We offer virtual occupational therapy, which is done very interestingly. Often the students are sent maybe a kit if they are working on fine motor skills. They may have a kit at home that when they're working with the OT, they're using their manipulatives along with the OT. So it's that very interesting. We do have virtual counselors here at TECCA. We have currently 3 virtual counselors and a director of the counseling program. And they work with students who need counseling for emotional support. I'm sorry. We do have a student who is receiving ASL instruction, American Sign Language instruction, in their home as part of their program. We have a student who is getting instruction in Braille as part of their program. We have the ability to close caption the live lessons, so the lessons that are being taught live by teachers. We have closed captioning available for students who are blind. We offer text, speech to text and text to speech services for our students as well.
All right, so we'll go ahead and get started with talking about our curriculum, instruction, and assessments here at TECCA. So we do work really hard to ensure that students have the potential to learn and the greatest potential to do their best by working regularly to review all of our curriculum. We work with Connections Academy to make sure that we're doing our part to meet the state standards using the curriculum that's provided. And then also working to help students achieve great things on state assessments and our in-house benchmark assessments. So before we get too far into that, I did want to just bring up a little bit about our EL program. So families complete a home language survey, which identifies potential EL students. These are students that come in and are flagged as maybe speaking a second language or having a second language spoken in their home. Because students participate in access testing each school year with frequent collaboration between gen ed and SPED teachers. EL students are supported and given modified assessments and opportunities to show what they know using the WIDA Can-Do descriptors. Students attend pull-out and push-in EL live lessons depending on their grade level and their EL WIDA level. All EL students have learning goals, so we work together with our teachers to ensure that they're working with their EL students to achieve those goals. Families receive quarterly progress reports, so this is something new that we are doing more often this year, which is communicating out more regularly to EL families how their students are doing and ways that we can support their students. Also very exciting is that most of Connexus is translatable using Google Translate. So for families who do speak a second language who may need translation services, much of the curriculum can be translated right there on their computer. And then for things that can't be translated, in-person meetings, over the phone meetings, documents like our student handbook or the EL handbook or IEPs can all be translated using an organization called MAPA. We work with to translate and help families that need that service. So much like in a typical brick and mortar, all of our students in grades 3 through 10 are required to participate in state testing, and in Massachusetts we call that MCAS. Our students come to us over the course of about 16 to 20 days throughout the school year at 9 separate sites. You can see we have a map over here on the side. This is how we determine where those sites will be. And so we take all of our students, we put their addresses into Google Maps, and then we create this pin map that helps us to identify kind of the central locations around the state. And as you can see, those 9 sites are spread from the very western part of the state all the way to the east, north, and south. Each of those sites has a testing site lead who's responsible for the site. They act as the on-site administrator. And at each of those sites, we run morning and afternoon sessions where students come, they're brought to the site by their parent, they're dropped off, they complete testing in a secure environment, and then head home when they finish. CAS is definitely one of the bigger things that we have to coordinate when it comes to bringing people together at TECCA. So it takes the whole staff. Each of our staff members goes out and proctors MCAS at these sites. They support the test site administrators and the students, and then they make a lot of calls before the testing to follow up with students and make sure that they know where to be and when. As far as professional development, we've had a really great opportunity this year to work with an organization called Teachers 21. They are supporting TECCA through several professional development opportunities. This includes working with our district administration leadership team. Every month we meet with them to talk about kind of where we're at, best practice as administrators, as a leadership team, and then also talk about where we want to go in the future. They also offer us individual monthly coaching for our district leadership team members. And they're working with our school-based leadership to provide some leadership training to support them as they begin their roles as leaders in schools. And then finally, they are working with us this year on a professional development for our entire district, focusing on diversity, equity, and inclusion in the virtual classroom. So we're meeting with them 8 times over the course of the year to fulfill kind of our goal of making that a priority. And then additional professional development relates to things like our Renaissance Star 360 testing, which is the 3-time-a-year benchmark assessment that we give our students to monitor progress and growth. We have Nearpod is new to us this year, and all of our teachers have the opportunity to use this. It's an educational platform that creates an engaging and focused environment where students can work towards standard mastery. It's a self-driven professional development, which is something new and different we're trying this year that I think a lot of our staff are really excited about, is the opportunity to kind of take on a professional development that they can kind of choose their own path. And then we support our first and second year teachers through a regular professional development. Our first year teachers meet weekly as a group to learn about different things that relate to their instruction, to their practice, how to use connections, how to create engaging live lessons and support their students. And our second year staff cohort will be focusing on instructional practices starting in the second semester of this year. And then lastly, this year, all of our instructional staff are receiving instructional coaching, which is a 4-week model based on Jim Knight's instructional coaching guide, where they get to reflect on their own practice, which we think is really important as educators, to give them the time and the space to reflect on what they do and how they can get better at that. We do have a lot of really exciting curriculum initiatives this year. Writers Room U is an organization that Dr. LaTuca actually found last year for us, and we started partnering with them. It's a really neat opportunity for our students to work with songwriters out of Nashville, and we worked with them for 8 weeks. And in that 8 weeks, they learn about the music industry, different parts of how to write music and what it takes to be a music writer, what it takes to be a musician. And then by the end of the 8 weeks, they have written and receive a copy of the song that they wrote with their songwriter. And that it's just been a really great opportunity for them. And then we have our Band for All, which is a band program that we're piloting this year. And that's going through our middle school, 5th grade through middle school. And our students have the opportunity to take a virtual band lesson, and then we'll perform a concert. We talked about Nearpod. We also use Discovery Education, which is a video-based educational platform for teachers to supplement our curriculum. We are starting this year a theater and acting program at our high school, and have added some additional CTE courses this year, because for us, we know that many of our students are on that path to look at not college after high school, but a program that allows them to go into the workforce. So we added computer science and cosmetology this year. We've increased our opportunities for work study. So students have always been able to take a work study, but we're hoping to make that program even a little bit bigger and allow for students to get a little bit more learning out of their work study program. We've increased our interventionist positions, identifying that students at TECCA, some of them are struggling in ELA and math. We wanted to be able to focus on that. So we've added 2 interventionists at the elementary school and 2 interventionists at the middle school who focus solely on supporting students who are identified as having difficulty in one of those 2 subjects. And then we also have a new curriculum coordinator position this year that allows us to dive into and take a look at some of the curriculum that we have and how we can improve it to help us better meet the state standards. And I will pass it over to Mel.
All right, so I'm going to speak a little bit to the teacher experience first and then the student experience. So we have a learning management system formerly known as Connexus, now known as the Pearson Virtual Classroom. And there are many features of the teacher account, obviously related to teaching responsibilities and teachers' roles. So it contains tools not only for communication, but for teaching, of course, including those for direct instruction and asynchronous learning, as well as grading and progress monitoring. So I'm actually going to share my screen so that you can see a little bit about what that looks like. And I am currently sharing from a fictional teacher account. So this is a demo account so that we're able to protect our students' privacy. And this is the teacher dashboard. So there are many ways that we can monitor student progress. So here you can see the number of students in each category in terms of their overall score. So it's broken down from 91 to 100%, 81 to 90%, etc. And that allows teachers to easily see who might need some more support in a particular area. So if they click here, they can see the names of those students and know to reach out to them to provide support. And then similarly, we also have a way of monitoring overdue lessons for students. So we know who's on track and who is behind, since that tells us, a student might be struggling on a particular lesson or a particular assignment, and that gives the teacher an indication to reach out to that student to provide individual support. And then we also have what's known as our escalation system. So we're able to measure different metrics to tell us whether a student is on track or in approaching alarm or alarm. And we have different metrics that measure those. So one, for example, is contacts. So Sarah had mentioned how every student at TECCA needs that homeroom teacher contact once every 2 weeks. So if a student has gone further than 2 weeks without that contact, then they would go into approaching alarm and then alarm. And then again, we know that we need to provide some interventions to follow up with that student. We also have what's known as participation alarm or attendance alarm, and lessons or assessments alarm. And basically, those are metrics that tell us whether or not the student is participating in our program as they're required to. So like, for example, for participation alarm, if a student isn't completing lessons at the rate that they are expected to, say completing the lessons on their planner for that week, then they would go into approaching alarm or alarm. And then again, that would trigger the teacher to reach out and provide interventions for that student or additional support. So that's just one way that we monitor student progress. Another way, of course, is through different course grades. So there is the section grade book. And each teacher, of course, would not have this many courses to teach. This is just our fictional account. But for example, if we were to look at, let's say, Math 3A, this is the grade book for that particular course. So the teacher would see any ungraded assessments that need grading. And there they're able to review how a student responded on particular assessments. So how they did on multiple choice questions, how they did on open response questions, and they're able to provide feedback that way. They can at a glance see how all of their students are doing in that particular course. So what their overall score is, how many lessons they've completed, how many assessments they've completed, and where they're at in that course. They can also see an overview of all of the assessments, as well as the number of students who have taken each of the assessments. So they're able to get a snapshot of how students are progressing through that particular course. And then let's say teachers wanted to see how students did on a particular assessment and see if any reteaching was needed. They could take a look and see, for example, on this particular assessment known as a quick check, which is like a very abbreviated test. They could see that these particular students scored in the 50s and 70s, so perhaps some reteaching would be needed for those students. And then another way they're able to see students at a glance is from their students page. My students, and here they're able to kind of see for each particular student, you know, whether they're in alarm or not, what their overall score is and how many overdue lessons they have. And then of course we have tools for communications, as I mentioned before. So webmail is a great way for teachers to interact with students in an entire class or on an individual basis, as well as reach out to parents. And then we have the message boards as well. So every lesson that's provided live to students is also recorded, and all of the links to those recordings are posted in the section message boards. And that way students are able to go back to that lesson if they missed it, or if they just want to go back and do some review, they're able to rewind, pause, fast forward, which is a really great feature of those live lessons. So that is the teacher perspective. So now we'll head into the student perspective. Patrick, okay, thank you. All right, so from the student viewpoint, through their student login, they have access to curriculum, assessments, and message boards, as I mentioned, as well as access to live lesson. And again, that is our tool, our platform that we use for our live virtual instruction. We also have those tools to communicate with teachers, other school personnel, and other students, as well as tools for scheduling and planning. So I will log into our student demo account and show you what that looks like from their perspective. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. All right, so here is the student homepage. So here you can see some events that are coming up for this fictional student. They have an advisory group and a morning meeting. And all of these events come from the student planner. And what's great about the student planner is that teachers are able to add in their live lesson times as well as the links to each of their lessons so that they're easily available. And basically it creates kind of like a customized schedule for each student. So those are some helpful reminders to help them access their lessons. So this particular student is on a winter break, Gus demo. So let's find a time when they are back in school. And again, since this is a demo account, they have a hodgepodge of lessons in elementary, middle school, etc. But let me click on one so that you can kind of get a sense of what those lessons look like. So this is really the asynchronous component at TECCA. And at the elementary level especially, each student has a learning coach who guides them through each lesson step by step. And there's actually what's called a coaching guide that provides all of the prompts and answer keys for learning coaches to guide their students through a particular lesson, so they know exactly what to do. So this one here is an example of a math lesson. So it starts with some review questions and answers. Then there is kind of like a warm-up problem to get them thinking about the concept that's going to be reviewed in that lesson. There are objectives and keywords that go with each one as well. And then there are often videos to watch as well as links to workbook problems for students to complete with the guidance of their learning coach, as well as hands-on activities for them to complete. So once they get through the lesson, they'll come to the assessment that comes at the end. So every lesson, for the most part, I'd say 99% of lessons end with an assessment, whether it's something quick, like a quick check, a quiz, a test, or even a portfolio, which is what we call our projects here at TECCA. And then once they're done with that, they would mark their lesson complete. And then back at the home page as well, students are able to easily contact their teachers. So they can see here, for example, their homeroom teacher. This button right here would allow them to quickly webmail message their teacher. as well as access their live lesson room by clicking on the little LL icon that's right there. So that is kind of a crash course of the student perspective. And then we are actually going to try out a live lesson clip and see if we're able to share that experience with you. Okay, so I don't think that the sound is coming through, but that's okay. So really we want you to see kind of what's possible in the live lesson classroom. So we use a app called Adobe Connect, and it really allows the teacher to customize the learning experience for their students, set things up how they want to, like it's their own personal classroom. So here you can see that Mrs. Morley here, this is a 3rd grade language arts live lesson. She set up her classroom with the objectives, a warm-up question, a warm-up chat pod, and here you can see that students have their webcams on, so that's another great way to facilitate that connection between students in the classroom. And this is just a shortened 3.5-minute clip of the ELA lesson. So here we've proceeded into one of the practice activities where students are figuring out which detail doesn't belong related to the main idea. So students are able to participate in the chat pod. Here they did what's called a chat waterfall. So the teacher tells them to make their, or rather to share their answer, but wait on submitting the answer until she tells them. And then the chat pod floods with answers so that she can see how all of the students did. They're also able to use microphones to share their responses orally if that works better for them. Some work better just typing in a chat pod, and some are better or more easily able to express their thoughts and their answers using a microphone. So there's that option as well. And then here they are identifying the main idea of this very short passage. And a student had actually just read this section out loud. And then Mrs. Morley asked the students, what's the main idea of the passage? So after that was identified, she underlined it here using the whiteboard. And then students are now engaging in identifying the supporting details for that main idea. You can see them sharing the answers in the chat pod there as well. And then they go on to underline a couple more of those details as well. So that's kind of a very quick overview of what live lesson looks like and just some of the tools that can be used to engage students. So what's really great about it is that it is so customizable. And in the live lesson, teachers are also able to upload videos, which is a function that that Zoom doesn't have, so that we're able to see and hear everything that's going on.
Thank you, Mel. And so just some of TECCA's successes through the pandemic, pre-pandemic and continuing now, TECCA continues to operate pretty much without interruption. We did make a minor pivot over the course of the 2020-21 school year. We reduced the curriculum just a tad, and we increased social opportunities for our students and families to interact with one another in engagement activities. We supported Northeastern University, where we had teacher candidates participate, do their practicum experiences at TECCA. We have a great partnership with Bridgewater State University. We're called a professional development school. We actually have a meeting with them this afternoon, where we talk about different ways to support one another. So it's a symbiotic relationship. We did great in terms of our AP scores, number 61 out of 348 mass districts, which I was very proud of. Like to do better, but I think that's pretty impressive. And we're still exploring innovative ways to make TECCA the best possible learning experience we can have for our students and families. One thing TECCA does that I've never done in my brick and mortar experience is we survey our parents and students, as well as our faculty and staff. And so we have what's called a parent satisfaction survey. And we ask them various questions about how satisfied they are with our curriculum, the assessment, instruction, all different dynamics of the schooling experience. And what we found, out of the 1,023 respondents is that we scored very highly. So our parents look at us as a value add. And so I just thought I would share some satisfaction results. And I wanted to end the presentation component of this with a graduating senior. She graduated, I think, last year. And she said, I chose TECCA because I had a hard time with students at my public school. I was bullied and I had given up with school. When I heard about TECCA, I had hope for my future. Now I'm graduating. This day I thought would never come. All I feel is pure accomplishment. So as I said at the very beginning of this presentation, you know, TECCA is an option for students. And I think it should be considered as an option for all students for anywhere. You know, this student right here was a last chance option. She decided to choose the virtual option and it worked for her. So anyways, that's our presentation. I'm not sure if, I think we probably will have some questions. So that concludes our standard part of our presentation. If anyone has any questions, feel free to bring them on.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Doctor. So what we're gonna do is myself and my co-chair and the ranking member will ask a question, and then we'll move it on to Ed committee members. Remember, it's one question, please limit to one question. And then we will also ask Commissioner Tucker if she has any questions, and the commission. So I want to start with, and I would ask too that if the participants please raise their hands when they have a question. So I want to start with, and I'm just going to limit it to one question because I have many, but I'm going to limit it to one question as well. With their special ed services that were covered here, which I find really interesting. Just a quick one in regards to costs. So what does the school district, or how much does the state of Massachusetts spend on a child that is going to TECCA for special education services? What's the average?
So I can take that if that's okay, Dr. Latuka. Our special education students are funded at the same amount originally for tuition. But what we do is each year, at the end of the year, we complete what we call school choice claim forms. So on those forms, we list any specialized, any special ed services that the student got, and we receive funding for that after the fact. So we go through the school year. At the end of the year, we do our school choice claims, and that's where we list all of the special ed services that are above and beyond the standard cost for a student, and we are reimbursed that way.
And could you give me like an average? Is it like 30,000, 40,000, 50,000? What would be an average? And I'm looking at maybe a child that needs therapeutic, you know, supports and so forth.
Right. So our claim total last year was about $900,000. And the state sets the amount that you are reimbursed for different services. So for example, services from a special ed teacher, they set the amount per hour that you get reimbursed. The same for speech and language services. They will tell you on the form when you fill it out how much you can be reimbursed per hour for those services and for any other services that we provide for students. So it's a preset amount, and it changes slightly each year depending on the state funding, so that they generate the amount per hour that we are allowed to be reimbursed.
So the 900,000 covers the majority of the students, or we're talking about one student?
Oh, that's our total claim for our special ed students for the year.
Okay. Okay, great. That's good to know. Senator McQuarrie, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I just have one question. Thank you. And thank you for the presentation. It was very detailed and very informative. My question is in regards to tuition. I saw the cost. Is the tuition paid directly from the state to TECCA, or does it go to the local school district and then go to TECCA? And the follow-up to that would be, I saw there's an annual increase about 1.2%. Is that sustainable considering teacher salaries and typical increases in local communities?
I can take that. That works. So the tuition for the students at TECCA comes directly to us from the state. So we receive the payments through them monthly, but it comes directly from them. The 1% increase is a discussion we are currently having with them. Over time, it will probably not be successful, sustainable. But we're in this point where TECCA continues to accept more students. So that's an ongoing discussion we're having with the state.
Thank you.
Great. I'm looking to see if Representative McCarty is on to see if she has any questions. I know she had to step away. Okay, I don't see her. Okay, so next, Representative Curry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, TECCA, for your presentation. And I hope that this helps to better inform our working group here as SDE and the interested parties kind of create the guidelines and a framework for our remote learning in Connecticut. And while I appreciate, satisfaction data, AP successes, SAT scores, which are slowly becoming moot anyways, I think many of us more are interested in performance metrics and how TECCA has kind of addressed these challenges that come along with receiving, 46% out of 100 on the state's accountability system, where the system also notes as requiring assistance and intervention. So I think that information would be very helpful as well.
Sure, I'll address that. If you look at our most current data from last year, we actually performed at or above state average in all areas. And TECCA also improved in almost all grades by 5 to 10%. So that's one side of it. And the other side is, one of the things is that the type of student TECCA attracts. When we think about students with social emotional concerns and anxiety, and we think about the testing structure that TECCA participates in, the foundational requirement for a high stakes standardized test is that you're in a familiar environment. So what we do, which is unfortunate, is we take our students out of a familiar environment, which is their schooling experience, their home. We put them in a completely unfamiliar environment, like a hotel or a conference center hall, with people that they're not familiar with, put a high stakes test on them and say, when you're done, you can leave. So we don't feel that those results are really that reliable or valid. And the reason why I brought up last year's results is last year we were able to remote proctor the students. So they were in a familiar environment. And the other thing I would like to add is, by the very nature of the school and the students we attract, earlier I spoke about the off-cohort student. So in our high school, we attract off-cohort students. So when you look at a 48% graduation rate, as an example, that calculation brings into the metric the off-cohort number. So by the very nature of the population we attract, we are dinged, I guess, if you will, with the population of off-cohort students. So if you remove that from the metric, for example, if you look at a student that started last year in grade 12 and ended last year with grade 12, it wasn't a 48% graduation rate. It was about a 90% graduation rate. We want 100, but my point is the metric does not accurately tell the story.
And I appreciate that response. And maybe if you would be able to follow up with this presentation, the fact sheet we got, this group profile, to kind of put that into writing and be able to spell that out so we have a better understanding, that would be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
I would love to. Thank you for the question. I appreciate it.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Tucker, would you like to say something or ask a question? I know you didn't raise your hand, but there you are.
Thank you very much, Representative, and thank you for the recognition here, and thank you to TECCA for the presentation as well. I wanted to thank you and Senator McCrory for the invitation to the commission. For being here. I really wanted to make sure that our commission members were able to be a part of this presentation, and I see Fran hand is raised and others, but just for those to level set for all of us is that thank you to our legislature that really was thoughtful and deliberate as we're thinking about remote learning to create a commission that's going to spend the time to provide a report that will address the student performance, that will address access to programs and services and the quality of learning, feasibility, so the fiscal impact. And that's what your commission is doing right now. We started our work in September. And we're beginning to hear from others, those locally who are doing virtual learning. But we also, this past month, learned from Virtual Virginia and Florida Virtual that they've been doing this work statewide for many years. And so the commission is really on this fact-finding, understanding from all these partners, which is why today was also quite important for us to be able to sit and be able to ask questions as well. So thank you for the invitation here for our commission members. And thank you for the thoughtfulness that you said in Connecticut. Let's spend some time and really assess. Our first meeting, we looked at our assessment that was done, that we in Connecticut were able to see how our students perform, whether they were fully in person or whether they were hybrid or whether they were fully remote. And our first meeting was to dig into those performance measures to try to get a sense and a foundation for the work that the commission continues to do. So thank you all for being here in this space and for the presentation. And I'm sure I see members have their hands raised, so I wanted to give space for that. But thank you, I appreciate the recognition so I can set the stage for the work that the Remote Learning Commission is doing here in Connecticut.
Thank you, Commissioner. And I look forward to seeing that report. It's going to be really interesting how we're going to move forward here in the state of Connecticut. We know that something needs to be done, and I'm glad that we have a commission working on that. And I thank you for the work that you have been doing as well. Thank you. Next, I will ask Representative Johnson. And if people don't mind going on mute while we're hearing other committee members speak or ask questions. Representative Johnson.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and thank you for this great presentation. It's I think really timely for us to be able to look into how to do this. And one of the issues in my district, and I think in the region that I'm in, is trying to make sure that students who don't quite, it's not working for them in the regular high school, for example. How would we do this regionally, or is this done on a statewide basis, or is this something we're going to try and figure out, whether it would be a regional or local or statewide operation for students who really would do well in an alternative setting? And we don't have many of those, certainly not where we are. And I just wondered, you know, how that is working in Massachusetts. So thank you very much for this. And I'll look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Well, thank you for the question. The way TECCA is designed is that we are a virtual school district sponsored by the Education Cooperative. What that means is that regardless of which city or town you reside in, if we have space, as I was saying earlier, we have a 500 student wait list. If we have space, the student could unenroll from their traditional or their residence, their town of residence, and enroll in TECCA, as an example. I mean, I did a visit at, I think it was John C. Clark Elementary School in East Hartford. If I was a resident that lives in East Hartford, Connecticut, I would, if a TECCA was there, you could unenroll from East Hartford Public Schools and enroll into TECCA Virtual School. So that's how it works. So it's available for any Massachusetts student that resides in or has an address that is in Massachusetts.
Great, thank you. Let's see, who else do I have here? Fran Rabinowitz. Hi, Fran.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for this incredibly informative presentation. I appreciate it as a member of the Remote Learning Commission. I have a question that's kind of a combination. I noticed that the cost of your learning management system is about 10.2 million. I'm wondering if you could tell me more, or tell us more about who is the learning management system, and also in the synchronous asynchronous, can you give me an idea of what that looks like, for example, for a fourth grader?
Okay, Kathleen, I see that you unmuted, but I'll start on that. So the way a Connections Academy school works is I kind of liken it to a car wash, where you say you go into the car wash and you want the works. So that's a cost. But what TECCA has done is we said we don't want the works. We just want the triple foam wax and the undercarriage wash, as an example. So my point is That money that we're spending right now is to Pearson. They're a vendor, but I really look at them as a partner for TECCA. So we get some services from them. So what you saw, the Connexus system, that's part of what we're paying for in terms of our school structure. When we talk about the curriculum, although our curriculum is not exclusively with Pearson, the curriculum, the foundational curriculum is. So that money goes to those services of that car wash that we decide to pay for. The other money goes to other types of the learning experiences that we supplement our school with. Did you want to add anything to that, Kathleen? Does that answer your question, Fran?
Yes, I think so. But your curriculum is based upon the Massachusetts standards, correct?
Yes. And so like any curriculum where you buy the textbook and the worksheets that you put into a brick and mortar classroom, you know, our teachers do supplemental activities and materials to supplement that. But yes, it is aligned to the Massachusetts curriculum frameworks. And if there's gaps or where there's gaps or there's not attention given to one concept enough, our faculty and staff supplement those areas.
And the follow-up with that is the synchronous, asynchronous?
And so can you remind me exactly what you wanted to know about?
I just wanted to see how you work that. I mean, you talked about it being synchronous, asynchronous.
Okay.
And I wasn't sure of what that would look like for an elementary child.
Okay, that's a great question. So in our elementary, I mean, Mel, you can talk to, you can talk about, but I'll start by saying in the elementary, and then Mel, you can talk more about the elementary, but in the elementary school, part of the day is synchronous, meaning there's live lessons, and part of the day is asynchronous, meaning they're working offline. As you go up in grades, the percentage of synchronous live lesson experience as opposed to asynchronous changes. But Mel, maybe you can let Fran know what a day in the life of the elementary school student looks like.
Sure. So students receive instruction daily in math and ELA, I should say 4 times a week at each of the grades K through 5. And then they have science or social studies once or twice each week in terms of that synchronous contact, that synchronous lesson. So those lessons range from 30 minutes to an hour, depending on the day and the lesson. And then in addition to that, like Dr. Latuka said, students have the lessons on the planner like those that I showed you. That's the asynchronous component that the learning coach guides the students through, that have, you know, that Pearson curriculum that has the e-textbooks. At the younger grades, those are their physical workbooks as well. So some of it is online and some of it is offline work.
And I would just like to add that the synchronous part of our experience for the students is not just live lesson classes. Like we also do targeted instruction with students in the synchronous classes. We do something called curriculum-based assessments. If we think that a student might need some extra support or we're wondering if they are getting a concept, we might do that through the phone or through the synchronous classroom. So they're multi-use.
Thank you so much. I have many more questions, but I know I'm limited here, but maybe I can follow up with you. Thank you very much.
Fran, reach out if you need. I'd be
Okay.
happy to have a conversation with you.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Fran. Next I have, and I'm going to read them as they come up with their hands up. So Rosie Loshtek from CAS.
Hi, thank you. And I just want to say thank you for this presentation. It's very insightful. And I'm going to follow up a little bit because my question is pretty similar to Fran's. Second one on synchronous, asynchronous for especially elementary children, thinking about the fact that, and what I really want to know is how are they being taught to cooperate, collaborate, communicate with each other? How are you teaching them to work together when they are at a distance and whatever? But it's those interpersonal skills right now. And especially we're seeing at the elementary level from kids who, and I'm thinking kindergarten, first grade, who haven't been in pre-K, et cetera. How are you teaching those skills of taking turns and working together?
So I can jump in here. So, we make our live lessons as interactive as possible. So, each classroom has a set of behavioral expectations that are posted just like you would in a brick and mortar classroom that, students are following each day, and teachers, so many students are eager to participate, especially in the younger grades, which is great to see. So we're able to facilitate that connection one way through the use of webcams. You know, at the upper grades, students tend to be a little bit more shy, but I would say almost every student has their webcam on, at least at the beginning and end of a lesson, so they can see each other and build that connection, that sense of classroom community. And then, you know, within their classrooms, teachers build that community as well in different ways. So like they might have a warm-up question that's just like a getting to know you question. So they can get to know each of the students, especially at the beginning of the year as well. Usually when they begin, it's kind of like that, you know, that book, like the first 6 weeks of school, where they get to know each other, set the routines and things like that. And then of course, in addition to that, we have elementary assemblies on at least a monthly basis at the K-2 and then at the 3 to 5 level, that we find really helps to build that sense of community as well. So like, for example, last month we had a culture fair where students were able to, you know, send in videos or presentations to share a little bit about their own culture. And that way they're able to see, you know, things that they had in common with other students, as well as celebrate their differences. And then of course we have our amazing elementary counselors who have lunch bunch. I believe it's once each month, so that they have that opportunity to learn about social skills, you know, emotional regulation, things like that. And then this year as well, we actually started a stipend position for a kind of like a family connectedness position, so that students would have recess opportunities at least once a month, as well as elementary school clubs for students to interact in that social way. Does that help to answer?
Yes, great. Thank you. I guess more than that, it's how do they interact with each other? Do you put them into like breakout rooms, or are you doing any of that kind of thing so that they are really able to work together on a group project or anything like that?
Yes, so we do have breakout rooms that teachers use during their lessons as well, whether it's to, you know, discuss questions or work on completing a project together, so that they're able to collaborate, and then that sets them up for success in the middle school as well and beyond.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. And I see that some Ed committee members have raised their hands. So I'm going to go to Representative Napoli.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all very much for the presentation. I have a quick question, and if you said it earlier and I missed it, I apologize. But what percentage of the teachers are state certified?
All of them.
And
off the top of my head, I don't have this data right in front of me, but I believe it's like 93% are highly qualified too.
Okay,
they all hold state Massachusetts certification for the role they teach. Okay,
great. And can you talk to me about teacher retention? How has that been?
It's actually been really good. I don't know the percentage off the top of my head, but year over year, we generally have almost the entire staff return. And then we had our first retiree last year. So we had our first TECCA retiree ever. So she left, but for the most part, it's almost 100% year over year.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Lealander.
Hi, good morning. Sorry, I was caught off guard. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and for both chairs for this opportunity. I have a question about some of the financial transparency that was shared in the beginning. When you say that TECCA is it's like sponsored by a learning cooperative, and that there's a 4% fee that is sent back to that cooperative every year. Can that be expanded upon to make, because is this a fully public school? Because that sounds a little bit more like a management company. And from my knowledge, I'm a former school board member, elected to my position. And I want to make sure that the management and oversight is reflecting the spirit of how Connecticut schools are run.
Well, I can start it, Kathleen, and then you can talk more about the sponsor fee. There's strong oversight over TECCA. We have a board of directors that kind of directs the division, the school. And then DESE is the main oversight, which is Department of Elementary and Secondary Education over TECCA. Kathleen can talk more about the sponsor fee, but they sponsor the school, and in return, we give them services as well. So it's like a symbiotic relationship there, where tech member districts students are allowed to take courses through TECCA and things like that. But go ahead, Kathleen, if you want to talk further on the actual sponsor fee.
The sponsor, the state had a requirement that we have a sponsor, that we don't just become an independent school, because we don't have a town oversight board. So the education cooperative is our sponsor. The 4% fee was agreed upon at the inception of TECCA 7 years ago. So there are certain services that we receive from the sponsor for that fee. So it is part of a requirement, and it is currently a 4% fee.
Can you expand on the services specifically, what that is? And the board of directors, that's an appointed position, correct?
The board of directors is an approved position, and it is like our school board that oversees us.
Not elected. Correct. Because there's not oversight by specific towns.
They have to be elected by the board, but it's run through DESE. So it's run through the state.
Okay.
The state approves them. That we don't need to have a person from each town on our board.
Well, that would be difficult considering the number of towns that are participating.
So when the agreement was originally written, the sponsor was going to provide us human resource services, payroll services. Our offices are located in their building. So again, as TECCA has grown over 7 years, the services have slightly changed. So that's just up for discussion about what they do, but they are directly related to us. If we have questions on certain areas, their administrative team is available to us for any questions that we might have.
Okay, thank you. I do thank you for the presentation. There are some really interesting ideas that were shared today, and I look forward to the continued discussion. Thank you for the opportunity to ask these questions.
Thank you, Representative. So I'm going to go back to, because I don't see any other representatives' hands up, I'll go to Dr. Evelyn Robles from Calais.
Thank you, Representative Sanchez. I do have a question about English learners program. My question to you is, I know the state of Massachusetts has a new bilingual law that allows native language instruction
Dr. Robles?
English learners, and they do have programmatic options for parents, either a transitional bilingual program, dual programs.
Dr. Robles, I don't know
Can
if it's
you
my
hear
computer.
me?
I don't know if it's your computer or my computer, but I
Can
can't,
you
we can't hear you.
me?
No,
No,
I
you're
can't.
breaking up. You're breaking up, Dr. Robles.
Let's see. Okay, can you hear me now?
Barely.
Okay, I'm gonna try to speak slow and see if you can hear my question. In regards to English learners, in programming for English learners, do you have the options for parents to utilize, for example, transitional bilingual programs, dual language programs, in ESL as a support, or it's just English as a second language support?
Okay, I don't know, Dr. Latuka, do you get that, or because it's broken up on my side, I'm not too sure.
I hope she came
I
here.
think we did. I think Heidi will.
I think we can talk about what
I'm
I
gonna try
heard.
to see if I can log in through my phone. 1 second.
Were you able to get that, Heidi?
Yes, I think we can answer based on what we heard.
Okay.
So we do not offer a bilingual program for students, and we don't have a bilingual service for parents.
Okay.
But we do offer the translation service. We do offer the language interpreter upon, like, the second a student goes to enroll or a family goes to enroll, they have the opportunity to have an interpreter work with them through the enrollment process. And then once they're fully enrolled at TECCA, we have the translation services that we provide through MAPA, but we don't have a dual language or bilingual program.
Okay. And I would guess that there's a question, but she's still having technical difficulties. Okay. So I'll move on to Ajit from the Connecticut State Department of Education.
Thank you, Representative Sanchez. And Dr. Robles, I think your computer is still generating feedback to us. So if you could mute, that would be appreciated. Thank you. And thank you, Patrick and the TECCA team for coming to this meeting and sharing your thoughts. My name is Ajit Gopalakrishnan. I'm the Chief Performance Officer at the Department of Education. I want to actually go back to some data questions, if you don't mind. I think, Patrick, you spoke about test scores when Representative Curry, I think, asked about test scores. You spoke about how students were taking the assessment at a new location and how that might impact student performance. But I actually want to go back to growth results, not necessarily a one-time achievement results, but growth results. And when I looked at the Pearson report, the efficacy report that you shared, it seems like even when matched students were looked at from elementary school to middle school over a long period of time, and non-mobile students as well, sort of look at students who had some longevity in the program, it seems that students, in attending connections resulted in lower math test scores, and with substantial standard deviations like -0.5, -0.3, so sizable effects, if you will. And when I looked at the Massachusetts, the MCAS growth results, not the one-time achievement results, matched kids, it definitely seemed that it seemed consistent with that, where your reading scores were sort of, reading growth was kind of average, but math growth was actually lagging. So I want to throw that data point out there, and I'd like your reaction. But I'd also, and if we want to look beyond test scores, I also want to throw a few other data points. Chronic absenteeism, for example, it seems that chronic absenteeism is over 30%, and this is pre-pandemic, right? Where almost 1 out of 3 kids are chronically absent at TECCA. Or I know you talked about the 4-year grad rate, and I totally sympathize with you in terms of the almost brutal nature of that calculation, and that's frankly prescribed by the feds for all the states. So we don't have a means there. But even when you look at the 5-year rate, it seems like TECCA's rates are around 40% for the 5-year rate. So even if you had students who were lagging in their credit attainment, when they came to you, even with the 5-year rate is around 40%, while the state is around 90%. And then another metric I looked at was annual dropout rate, which is really the percentage of students in 9 through 12 who leave the program without graduating or without transferring anywhere. And TECCA's rates are over 20% when the state is around 2%. So I don't know. I was trying to come back on test scores with sort of a growth perspective, but then when I look at the other metrics, it seems like it's not just with test scores, but some of the other metrics as well, which obviously roll into your accountability percentile as well. So I wanted to get your reaction to sort of a growth approach to test scores, but also what about some of these other metrics?
Thank you. I appreciate the question. I'll start off and then I'll turn it over to Sarah. So you brought up chronic absenteeism. So let me just start there. when you look at how they calculate attendance at TECCA, once again, the metric doesn't tell the accurate story. And actually, Desi and I are working on making that more accurate. Chronic absenteeism is defined by a student missing 10 days of school over the course of a school year. And so at TECCA, or in a brick and mortar school, a student walks in, Patrick Latuca, here. If I'm there for 3 hours, I get marked as attending school for that day. TECCA, for some reason, the way it was designed in terms of calculating absenteeism was not calculated that way. We are calculated on school student performing 25 hours worth of schooling a week for kindergarten through grade 5 and 28 hours of schooling per week for 6 through 12. If a student, and again, parents put the hours in, teachers, look at them and verify them. If a student put in 24 hours or there was a mistake in putting in those hours, the student would be marked absent one day. So we found that if you actually looked at the pandemic, and if you look at our response letter to the accountability review from last year, our attendance rates were actually some of the best in the state in March, April, and May, where our elementary school, we had a 99% attendance rate in all 3 months. In April, and same thing with the middle and high school, in April and May and June, we had a very high attendance rate. So my point is, the metric is not just, hi, I'm here, like a login into TECCA. If it was measured in logins every day, we would have 100% attendance rate probably across the board. So I'm addressing that question by saying that Desi and I are both in agreement that the chronic absenteeism that it shows up is not an accurate measurement of what's actually happening at TECCA. The second thing that you bring up is the performance in growth metrics. What we have implemented at TECCA now is STAR 360. It's as you probably know, it's a normed, reputable assessment that we are looking at growth for students over the course of years. And what we're finding is students are growing at TECCA. It might not be showing up on a standardized test like an MCAS test, as an example. If you have a 5th grader that's off cohort, or let's say off of their grade equivalency by a year, and they grow a year, it might show up on our STAR, it would show up on our STAR 360 that student grew 9 months. Although they might not be able to pass the MCAS test because they're not grade 5 proficient yet, we grew them. So I will start by answering your questions with those two things, and then I'll turn it over to Sarah, who has a couple other things she'd like to add.
Sure, yeah, just from the school counseling perspective, talking about graduation rate. Yeah, the numbers don't lie. Our graduation rate is not as high as we would like it to be. But just as Dr. Latuca was saying before, there really is a story behind those metrics, especially when you think about the vulnerable populations that are choosing TECCA. We have students who it takes them 5-6 years to graduate, even when they're starting high school with TECCA for various reasons. Perhaps they've been hospitalized for a significant amount of time. They have something going on in their personal life. And to me, I mean, it might just be the school counselor in me, but I would much rather see a student graduate in 6 years, even though they're going to ding our grad rate as the way the state reports it, than see them drop out. We do have also a fair number of kids who come to TECCA and it's not the right fit for them. And they do move on to other options like Job Corps, and they don't enroll back in a brick and mortar public school as well, but it's something that we're working on. That's where the credit recovery piece comes in, and where we're trying really hard to capture those students, keep them here, because a lot of times they're coming to us already a little beaten down, and it's hard sometimes to keep their attention when they feel like the education system is against them. But I do appreciate the question, and it's certainly something that we are working on consistently.
And I just want to say a little bit more about the dropout rate too. We are looking at innovative ways, something certificate, career technical education certificate programs, innovation pathway programs, because some of our students, as Sarah was saying, come to us, already damaged, already, as a last chance option, and they just want to move off into the workforce and get a GED. But what we're trying to say is we're going to bring in different types of opportunities for you now. So when you just stay with us, because we'll prepare you for the workforce. We say college and career ready, but what does that really mean in a traditional brick and mortar public school or in any public school? Are we really preparing every single student for college or career? Well, TECCA is really preparing students for college, and now we're becoming more hyper-focused on career because we feel and believe that if we actually have a pathway for that child or for that student to move through and actually enter the workforce, they won't want to drop out and enter the workforce. They want to get the skills they need to go into that career. So that's how I'd respond to that.
Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing. I do think that the Massachusetts growth model does not expect proficiency, just to clarify for the committee as well, that it's not about being proficient. Any growth on the MCAS scale would contribute to the student growth percentiles as well. So, but thank you for your response.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Next I have Irene Parisi from the State Department of Education.
Thank you, Representative Sanchez, and also thank you to Senator McCrory for inviting us to be here. We really appreciate the opportunity to hear from Dr. Lutuka and the team. My question actually goes back to, I think it was on slide 5, there was a bullet with regard to extracurriculars. So I understand that the students withdraw from their home school and then enroll into TECCA. So I'm just curious, how might the students access extracurriculars such as athletic programs or even performance programs like in the arts? So could you expand on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, there's two things. One, we're trying to build it at TECCA. Opportunities, we have a theater department now that's working on having productions of band, as you heard earlier. One of the things I had done is we had piloted a cross-country team, and I'd met with MIAA, which is the Massachusetts Interscholastic Athletic Association, to create actually a track and field for the high school. But we also have something called an MIAA Waiver 52, which allows a student to participate in activities in their sending district if they want to, and the sending district allows that to. And I've only, in the course of my career here, I've only had one town say no. So if a student wanted to participate in football or ice skating or theater or band or whatever it is, we just agree that they can, and they can participate in their local district. But in addition to that, as I said, we're still trying to build those opportunities at TECCA and figure out a way to make sure that we have the same type of opportunities and more here for those students.
Great, thank you, that's helpful.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Next I have Lauren Mancini from AFT Connecticut.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. And I'm actually mirroring back on Representative Napoli's question, so I thank him for asking his as well. Where do you get your teachers from? Do they apply to you? Do they apply to the state? And are they unionized? Are they members of local organizations where they can get professional development? And do they work 100% for you because the hours are all over the place, or are many of them employed elsewhere as, say, teachers or tutors and then work with you as well?
That is an excellent question. I think next time we do a presentation like this, I'll address it. So all of our teachers are hired by TECCA. So we have screening committees that go through just like a traditional brick and mortar world would. We'd have a chair of a committee, members of the committee that relate to that department or school, and they go through the screening process. We use an advertisement platform called School Spring. So that's where we basically advertise our positions. All teachers are full-time TECCA employees, although it's very flexible in terms of the learning environment and learning experience. Our teachers, or actually all faculty and staff, work a traditional school day at TECCA, which would be 8 to 3:30. We are piloting after-school calling activities and things like that. But to answer your question, all of them are state certified. All of them go through a rigorous screening process like you would in a traditional brick and mortar world. We advertise through School Spring, and they all work a standard school day.
And do they get professional development from you?
Yes.
Is that also okay?
Yep, they get coaching. They have coaching. Actually, let me expand on that a little bit. Since it's new to some people, we actually have a pretty intensive onboarding orientation program for all of our new faculty and staff. So basically there's like a 3-day long, Heidi Nelson Bufo kind of like oversaw that, but it's a 3-day long intensive orientation of how do we do school in a virtual context, and then learning about all the tools and how to, all the communications and all the expectations. So they go through a rigorous process before they actually enter the classroom or whatever role they're going to be occupying.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank Thank you. I'm looking at my screen. I don't see any other hands up. Let me just double check. Oh, we got one now. Kate Diaz from CEA. Hi, Kate.
Hi, thank you all for the opportunity to kind of look through and see your data. I just want to follow up on Lauren's question. Are your contracts with your teachers individually negotiated, or are they unionized?
Oh, thank you for the question. I apologize. I didn't get into that part. Prior to, we do have a union now. It's a TECCA union. We're in negotiations right now for our initial contract. Prior to the union coming to TECCA, we had, and we still do, it's the active document right now. We have something called an employee policy manual, and we looked at the salaries across the state, and we created a salary scale for all positions. And so if a teacher comes in with X amount of experience and X amount of educational credentials, you know, and we verify it, they get on a step in a lane of our salary scale. And so, as I said, we're in the negotiation component of this union. It started a year ago. We decided to postpone the union negotiations and adopt or continue our contract, if you will, with the TECCA Employee Policy Manual. And we've just restarted negotiations. It's a great relationship. And they're with the MTA, just so you know.
Excellent. And then my other question was whether or not your school goes through NEASC certification.
We are accredited by Cognia, but actually that's a great question because we are going to be going through that process. We communicated with them, I think about Kathleen, time is eluding me, like what, 2 months ago or 3 months ago, we met with them. And we are going to begin the accreditation process with NEASC. And like I said, I was part of a team that went to New Haven and did a visit there. So it was wonderful.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Great. Thank you, Kate. Let's see, my ranking member, Representative McCarty. I think you're on mute. Kathy, I think you're on mute.
I apologize, Chairman Sanchez. I lost the screen totally again. Please excuse me if this question has already been asked, but twofold. I noticed in your literature you mentioned a cap of 3,000 students going forward. Could you just perhaps for the attendees explain how you determine that cap? And then second part of the question is, how do you keep ongoing communication in Massachusetts with the Massachusetts Department of Education and the other outside entities dealing with education? Is there any ongoing communication there, and how does that work? Thank you, Representative Sanchez.
Sure. So I'll start with the communication component first. So we are in constant communication with DESE. I meet with them on a regular basis and we go over, any school related topics that we want to discuss. I've met with Commissioner Riley a few times as well. So we're in constant communication. When it comes to our cap, the cap is a state mandated cap. I mean, they tell us what our cap is, and if we think we need to increase it, we make a request. They either approve it or don't. And so to give you just a brief cap history, our cap was 2,000 a few years ago, and we reached that cap and we had a wait list. So we made a request to go up to 2,400. So it went to 2,400. We wanted to stay there before the pandemic happened because we didn't like to just keep growing and growing. We wanted to kind of like solidify the school and keep everything the same for at least 1 year. Pandemic happened. The state actually reached out to us and asked, because our wait list was so large, and we had a conversation. Could we absorb 300 more students? And we had a lot of conversation about that because, without compromising the integrity of the experience. And so we talked about it. We looked at the dynamics of the school. We staffed up and we did. We increased it to 2,700. And like I was just saying earlier, you mentioned the cap of 3,000 now. We're at 2,700, and recently, within the last month and a half, we increased it to 3,000 with a preference for medically fragile students because we really want students to be in school. And so if you have a medically fragile designation and there's something going on in your world, we've opened the doors. So we are at 3,000, but like I said earlier, we're slowly kind of bringing students in. We've cleared the medically fragile students off of the wait list, but we're slowly bringing students in to see how, what reaction is that having, or what effect is that having on the school itself. And we're staffed fine and appropriately for it right now. But that's why we're bringing them in slowly and that's why we have, like I said, a wait list, and we have only 27, 25 right now, because we're slowly and methodically taking kids in. I hope that answers your question thoroughly.
Excuse me, Representative Sanchez, but yes, it does. If you could just say, but do you then have a priority list? I know you mentioned the medically fragile, but then does it continue?
Yes.
Or is it, okay.
Yeah, right now, the top three would be medically fragile is now number one. And if you go on our web, and I can get the information to you if you'd like to see our enrollment policy. Number two is if you have an enrolled sibling. And then three, I believe it's if you have a special ed situation that requires this type of a setting.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Kathy. And I have Commissioner Tucker next. But since you're on the subject, I just quickly want to ask. Now, you said a cap of 3,000. Is that just TECCA? Because I know you mentioned there are 2 virtual schools in the state of Massachusetts. So is that 3,000 total throughout the whole state, or are there additional children enrolled in virtual school?
We're talking exclusively for TECCA. GCVS, which is Greenfield, the other virtual school, I believe their cap I think it's 1,000.
Okay, so that would be a total of close to 4,000 children that possibly would be in a virtual school setting.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, Commissioner Tucker?
Thank you, Representative. And not a question, but to let Dr. Latuka know that as a remote learning commission, we may very well be reaching out to ask more questions, and to appreciate our committee members who are here, because as you can see, I can assure you the level of questions that you're getting from our remote learning commission members, these are the levels of inquiry at every meeting when we brought in others to talk to us about what they're doing. So you can be assured that these are the kinds of questions and commentary, and really looking closely at what will work best for students in Connecticut. And so I just wanted to be assured of that. We have a web page dedicated to the commission, and so all our meetings are recorded and posted there. So if you ever, members of the policymakers ever want to go back and take a look at what we've learned from our other programs that we brought in, you certainly can have access to that. So again, it's my wrapping things up with we canceled the commission meeting for this month so they could participate here today. So again, thanking both you and Senator McCrory for allowing us to be here to listen to Patrick and his team.
Well, I appreciate that, and Commissioner, feel free to reach out to me or us anytime. And I truly appreciate that Connecticut is exploring this opportunity because the kids will love it. I mean, there's a population of student that will definitely benefit from this if Connecticut decides to move forward with any type of a virtual option. So I appreciate you exploring it as a community.
Thank you, Commissioner Tucker, and thank you, Dr. Latuka. I don't see any other hands raised at the moment.
Representative Laura, that I see on the top left.
Oh, we have another one here. There we go. Okay, Representative Devlin, how are you?
I'm good, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the opportunity to hear this presentation today. And I know that you were so excited when you were exposed to this that you brought it. Gave us the opportunity to learn more. I'll apologize in advance if this question has been asked, but it does have to do with the funding. So I understood that the state pays TECCA on a per pupil basis. I think you said it was around $8,000. What I wasn't clear on, particularly with the ability to connect back to what would be the sending school, is if the money follows the child, so to speak. Is the state still funding at a per pupil basis in the public schools or the schools where that child would be attending, and they're sending $8,000 to TECCA, or is it one or the other?
I believe the fund, when the student leaves their district school and comes to TECCA, the funding will end at that district school and the funding will start with TECCA for that student in our schooling. Patrick, I don't know if you have more
That's
details.
accurate. Yes, that's correct. Because if a student comes halfway through the year, it's half the funding. It's prorated.
Okay. And then, as you mentioned, for arts or for sports, that there was a relationship that you maintain with those schools. Do you provide a per diem or a cost, some kind of funding back to the sending school for the participation of the child in those activities?
No.
Okay. Great. Well, thank you for answering my questions. Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Well, thank you for
slip
them.
under the wire.
Thank you. Just looking down the list. Okay, okay. Going once, going twice. No one else has a question? My co-chair, Senator McQuarrie, do you have any closing remarks before we sign off?
I'm just, I want to again thank the people from TECCA that come down, providing this information. It's very detailed. It's great, a lot of great things you guys are doing. We look to learn from you as we move forward in our process. And I appreciate your efforts. And I'm sure the State Department of Education will be in contact with you pretty soon.
Thank you. We appreciate the offer.
Absolutely, and I'm glad that we had the members of the commission present and they were able to ask some questions. I know they're going to have a lot more, and I know they'll probably be reaching out to you, Dr. Latuka. So thank you so much again for the time and for giving us this opportunity to ask you questions and to see this presentation. Myself, Senator McQuarrie, and Representative McCarty, when we went up to see you, we were really intrigued by what we saw, and we had to bring it here to Connecticut to show everyone the presentation and to see how they felt. And I'm sure there's more questions to follow. And I encourage people to reach out to TECCA, and if you have any other questions. And I look forward to hearing from the commission this year, this next session, to see how we're going to move forward in the state of Connecticut. Because I truly believe that we need to look at this virtual school setting for the state of Connecticut. So thank you so much. And your staff, thank you for the wonderful presentation. And I want to wish everyone a wonderful holiday, and take care.
Thank you all. Have a great rest of your afternoon and a great weekend. We appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you.
Great.
Bye, everyone.
I'm going to adjourn the meeting. Thank you.